The Crusades and the Reformation, religious movements that changed the world. Introduction. The Crusades, 1096 to 1291, and the Reformation, 16th century, represent two monumental religious movements that shaped Western civilization. While separated by centuries, these movements were interconnected through their profound impact on Christianity, society, and culture. The Crusades reflected a unified Christendom mobilized for military and spiritual goals, while the Reformation marked the fragmentation of that unity. This essay explores the relationship between these movements, examining their origins, influence on each other, and lasting legacies. 1. The Crusades forging a unified Christendom. Origins and objectives. The Crusades were born out of a desire to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim control and to protect Christian pilgrims. They were driven by religious zeal. Pope Urban II's call at the Council of Clermont, 1095, emphasized salvation and spiritual rewards for participants. Papal authority. The Crusades reinforced the Pope's role as the leader of Christendom, centralizing religious power in Rome. Unifying the Church. East-West relations. The First Crusade aimed, in part, to heal the schism between the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches, 1054. However, events like the Fourth Crusade, 1204, exacerbated the divide. Internal consolidation. The Crusades presented the Catholic Church as a unifying force, channeling the martial energies of European nobility into religious warfare. Spiritual and cultural impact. Penitential warfare. The Crusades popularized the idea that acts of war could be redemptive, a theological innovation that persisted into later conflicts. Intellectual exchange. Contact with the Islamic world introduced Europe to classical knowledge preserved in the East, laying intellectual foundations for the Renaissance and, indirectly, the Reformation. 2. The Reformation, a fractured Christendom. Origins and key figures. The Reformation began as a theological challenge to Catholic practices and authority, led by figures such as Martin Luther. His 95 Theses, 1517, condemned the sale of indulgences, a practice tied to crusade fundraising. John Calvin and Huldrych Zwingli. These reformers expanded the movement, emphasizing scriptural authority and predestination. Rejection of papal authority. The Reformation marked a decisive break from the centralized power of the Catholic Church. Critique of crusading ideals. Reformers rejected the theology underpinning the Crusades, particularly the idea of indulgences and the merging of temporal and spiritual power. Emphasis on individual faith. The Reformation's focus on personal salvation and Scripture undermined the collective, hierarchical vision of Christendom promoted during the Crusades. Fragmentation of Christianity. Protestant movements. Lutheranism, Calvinism, and Anglicanism emerged as distinct traditions, challenging Catholic dominance. Wars of religion. The Reformation's religious divisions led to conflicts like the 30 Years' War, reshaping Europe's political and religious landscape. 3. Connections between the Crusades and the Reformation. Indulgences and the roots of reform. The Crusades popularized the granting of indulgences, promises of forgiveness for sins in exchange for participation or financial contributions. Abuse of indulgences. By the 16th century, the sale of indulgences to fund papal projects, e.g., St. Peter's Basilica, sparked outrage among reformers. Luther's critique. Martin Luther's challenge to indulgences can be traced to their origins in crusading theology, illustrating a direct link between the two movements. Theological evolution. From unified Christendom to personal faith, the Crusades emphasized collective action under papal authority, while the Reformation shifted focus to individual interpretation of Scripture and personal salvation. Questioning of authority. The Reformation's critique of the Church's temporal power mirrored growing skepticism about the morality and effectiveness of crusades. Social and political consequences. Empowerment of secular leaders. Both movements altered the balance of power between church and state. The Crusades bolstered monarchs by aligning them with the Church, while the Reformation empowered rulers to assert independence from papal control. Cultural transformation. The Crusades facilitated cultural and intellectual exchange, which contributed to the Renaissance and the humanist thought that informed the Reformation. 4. Long-term impact on Christianity. Legacy of the Crusades. Religious warfare. The Crusades established a precedent for combining religious and political aims in warfare, influencing conflicts such as the Reconquista and the European Wars of Religion. Interfaith relations. The Crusades shaped Christian-Muslim and Christian-Jewish relations, leaving legacies of conflict and reconciliation efforts that continue today. Legacy of the Reformation. Diversity in Christianity. The Reformation led to the proliferation of Protestant denominations, decentralizing religious authority and fostering pluralism. Modern religious thought. Emphasis on scripture and individual conscience influenced modern Western Christianity, from evangelical movements to ecumenical dialogues. A shared impact on the modern world. Challenging authority. Both movements contributed to the erosion of centralized authority, paving the way for modern notions of individual rights and state sovereignty. Cultural and intellectual growth. The Crusades facilitated the transmission of knowledge, while the Reformation's emphasis on education and literacy further advanced Western intellectual traditions. 5. Modern interpretations and lessons. Historical reflection. Crusades in retrospect. Modern Christian leaders often view the Crusades as a cautionary tale about the dangers of religious zealotry and the misuse of faith for political ends. Reformation's continued relevance. The Reformation is celebrated for its emphasis on reform and renewal, but also critiqued for its role in deepening religious divisions. Ecumenical and interfaith efforts. Bridging divisions. The shared history of the Crusades and the Reformation has inspired ecumenical movements seeking to heal divisions within Christianity and between Christianity and other faiths. Promoting peace and understanding. Lessons from these movements inform contemporary efforts to promote dialogue, reconciliation, and mutual respect. Conclusion. The Crusades and the Reformation were transformative movements that reshaped Christianity and the world. The Crusades sought to unify Christendom under a common purpose but often deepened divisions, while the Reformation fractured that unity in pursuit of theological and institutional reform. Together, these movements illustrate the dynamic interplay between faith, power, and society, leaving legacies that continue to influence modern Western Christianity. By critically engaging with their history, Christians today can draw lessons about the complexities of religious identity, the challenges of reform, and the enduring importance of faith in shaping human civilization. 6. Cultural and intellectual transformations stemming from the Crusades and the Reformation. Both the Crusades and the Reformation significantly contributed to cultural and intellectual developments in Europe. Their influence extended beyond religion, shaping art, science, education, and human thought. 1. The Crusades and cultural exchange. The Crusades opened Europe to a broader world, facilitating the exchange of ideas, goods, and technologies, knowledge and learning, classical texts. Contact with the Islamic world during the Crusades reintroduced Europe to Greek and Roman texts preserved by Islamic scholars. Advancements in science and mathematics. The Crusaders brought back knowledge of algebra, astronomy, and medicine, which would later influence European thought and the Renaissance. Art and architecture. Gothic influence. Elements of Islamic and Byzantine art, such as intricate geometric patterns and domes, were incorporated into European Gothic cathedrals and religious art. Cultural fusion. Artifacts, textiles, and design motifs inspired by the Islamic world influenced European craftsmanship. Urban and economic growth. Rise of trade hubs. The Crusades facilitated the growth of cities like Venice and Genoa, which became centers of commerce and culture. Monetization of the economy. The need to finance Crusades contributed to the development of banking and credit systems, which laid the foundation for modern capitalism. 2. The Reformation and educational reform. The Reformation emphasized literacy, personal engagement with Scripture, and the spread of ideas, catalyzing an intellectual revolution. Promotion of literacy and printing. Translation of the Bible. Reformers like Martin Luther translated the Bible into vernacular languages, making Scripture accessible to ordinary people. Printing revolution. The advent of the printing press amplified Reformation ideas, facilitating the rapid dissemination of pamphlets, books, and translations. The rise of universities. Reformation and academia. Protestant leaders established schools and universities to educate clergy and laity, fostering a culture of learning and critical thinking. Catholic Counter-Reformation. The Catholic Church responded with its own educational reforms, founding institutions like the Jesuit order to promote Catholic doctrine and education. Scientific inquiry.